There is a dangerous beauty in raw ambition and the lengths people will go to achieve their ultimate dreams. Witness the rise and the risks in our latest series of high-stakes cinematic dramas. Hit subscribe now and see what happens when the stakes are high. The morning my son called to wish me a happy birthday, he asked a question that made my coffee go cold. "Dad, is Marcus actually bringing you the $3,000 every month? In cash, like we agreed?" I set the mug down on the kitchen counter. Through the window, the oak tree in the backyard, the one my late wife Eleanor planted the year our son was born, was losing its last November leaves. I watched one fall before I answered. "Of course he is," I said. "Every first of the month, just like clockwork." There was a pause on the line. The kind of pause that means someone is deciding whether to believe you or protect you. "Okay, Dad, good. I just wanted to make sure." We talked for another 20 minutes about his company, about the weather in Chicago, about whether I was eating enough. When we hung up, I stood in my kitchen for a long time, staring at that oak tree, because I had just lied to my son for the first time in 64 years of life. My name is Gerald, and I am going to tell you exactly how I became a man who lied to protect the person who was destroying him. Let me take you back 3 years, because none of this makes sense without understanding what our family looked like before Marcus came into it. My son Ryan built his company from nothing. He started writing software in the basement of my house when he was 19 years old, eating cereal for dinner and arguing with me about keeping the lights on all night. I told him to get a real job. I was wrong about that, the way fathers sometimes are. By the time he was 32, his company had been acquired for more money than I could count without losing my place. He called me from San Francisco to tell me, and I sat on the back porch of this same house and cried into the phone like a child. Ryan wanted to move me out to California. I said no. This house is where Eleanor raised him. This house is where she died. I am not leaving. So, we made an arrangement. Ryan would send $3,000 a month to help with the property taxes, the upkeep, the prescriptions that Medicare does not cover. He was insistent about this. He had more money than he could spend, and I was his father, and that was the end of the discussion. For the first year, he wired it directly to my bank account on the first of every month. I protested. He ignored my protests. That was also the end of that discussion. Then Marcus entered our lives, and everything changed. Ryan met him at a charity gala in San Francisco. Marcus was charming, attentive, well-dressed in the way that makes you feel underdressed just standing next to him. He had a smooth voice and a firm handshake and a way of making you feel like the most interesting person in the room. Ryan was 35 and lonely and working 18 hours a day, and Marcus knew exactly how to fill the empty hours. They were married 14 months later in a ceremony I attended, wearing the same suit I wore to Eleanor's funeral, because it was the only good one I owned. Marcus hugged me at the reception and called me Dad, and I remember thinking that felt strange, but I pushed the feeling aside. Ryan was happy. That was what mattered. 6 months after the wedding, Marcus came to me with a suggestion. "The wire transfers are so impersonal," he said. We were sitting in Ryan's living room during a visit, and Ryan had stepped out to take a work call. Marcus leaned forward with that easy smile. "I drive through your area twice a month for client meetings anyway. What if I just brought it in person? It would give me a chance to check in on you, make sure the house is in good shape. Ryan worries about you being alone." I told him I was fine. "I know you are," he said, "but let me do this. It would mean a lot to Ryan, and honestly, it would mean a lot to me too, your family." I said I would think about it. Ryan called that evening, enthusiastic in a way that told me Marcus had already discussed this with him. "He genuinely wants to look out for you, Dad. He talks about you all the time." There was so much hope in my son's voice. He wanted us to be a family. How could I say no to that? I told Ryan it was a fine idea. That was the decision I would spend the next 2.5 years paying for. At first, it was exactly what Marcus promised. He showed up on the second Tuesday of every month, dressed sharply, carrying the $3,000 in an envelope along with whatever small gift he had picked up, a book he thought I would like, a tin of good coffee, once a set of birding binoculars, because he had noticed Eleanor's old ones on the shelf and asked about them. He would stay for an hour, sometimes 2. He helped me fix a screen door that had been sticking since summer. He sat at my kitchen table and listened to me talk about Ryan as a boy, about Eleanor, about the neighborhood as it used to be. He was very good at listening. What I did not notice, because I was not looking for it, was that he was also very good at learning. He asked questions that seemed like conversation but were actually inventory. He learned which neighbors I spoke to and which I did not. He learned that my eyesight had been getting worse and that I did not always open my mail promptly. He learned that I trusted Ryan completely and would not want to worry him over small things. He was building a picture of me. I understand that now. The first sign that something was wrong came 8 months in, and I dismissed it almost immediately. I had needed a new water heater, an emergency replacement. The old one had failed on a Thursday night, and the plumber could come Friday morning, and the bill was going to be $1,100 that I did not have sitting in my account at that moment. I called Marcus instead of Ryan, because Ryan was in the middle of a product launch and I did not want to add to his stress, and Marcus had become my point of contact for household matters anyway. Marcus said not to worry. He would bring extra the following Tuesday, an advance against the next month's allowance. He showed up with the envelope as promised. I paid the plumber. Problem solved. Except that the following month, the envelope was light. $2,200 instead of $3,000. I asked about it. The advance, Marcus said simply, with a small apologetic smile. We talked about this, Gerald. $3,000 minus the $800 you still owed from the water heater. I covered the difference last month out of my own pocket while I waited to settle it with Ryan, so technically you came out ahead. I stood in my kitchen trying to do arithmetic that did not add up. 1,100 minus 3,000 left something much larger than 800. I said so. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed me a note in his calendar. Dates, amounts. It was all very organized, very official looking. The numbers did not match what I remembered, but my memory has not been what it was since I turned 62, and the document on his screen looked so certain. I can have Ryan call you to confirm if you want, Marcus said. His tone was not unkind. It was patient, the way you are patient with someone who is confused. I told him that would not be necessary. That night I sat at my desk for a long time trying to reconstruct the math in my head. I could not make it come out right. But I also could not find the flaw, and the last thing I wanted was to call my son to say I was confused about money, because that is not a conversation you have at 64 without consequences. That is the conversation where people start talking about assisted living. I let it go. I should not have let it go. Over the following year, a pattern developed that I did not recognize as a pattern until much later. The envelope would be short. There was always an explanation, an advance I had forgotten, a fee he had covered on my behalf, a billing error that had already been corrected with Ryan and would be reflected next month. He always had documentation on his phone. He was always patient. He always made me feel like the confusion was mine. And I always let it go, because the alternative was telling my son that I did not trust his husband, and I did not have proof, only an old man's arithmetic and a feeling in my chest that I could not name. By the second year, I was receiving between $1,800 and $2,200 most months. I had adjusted my expenses to match. I told myself I was being practical. I told myself the discrepancies were probably my own errors. I did not let myself think the other thought, the one that waited for me in the quiet hours after midnight when sleep would not come. I started keeping notes. This is the thing I am most grateful for, that something in me, some stubborn old instinct, refused to stop paying attention entirely. I bought a small notebook at the drugstore, and I wrote down every visit, date, time, amount in the envelope, what Marcus said about any discrepancy, word for word as close as I could remember. I hid the notebook in the inside pocket of my funeral suit, hanging in the back of the closet. It seemed like the right place for it. I also started paying closer attention to Marcus himself. Not to catch him, I still was not ready to think that clearly, but because something had shifted in his behavior and I could not identify what. He was still charming, but the charm had become mechanical, in a way I could not quite describe. He no longer asked about Eleanor. He no longer stayed more than 30 minutes. He was always in a hurry, always had a client meeting he was late for, always had his phone face down on the table and glancing at it every few minutes. The gifts stopped. The birding binoculars conversation would not happen again. More than anything, he had stopped listening. He had learned what he needed to learn, and now I was simply a stop on a route. The thing that finally made me stop doubting myself happened on a Tuesday in March. Marcus arrived 40 minutes late, which was unusual. He seemed agitated. He put the envelope on the table without the usual pleasantries, and when I picked it up and counted it, I had started counting it in front of him, which I could tell irritated him. It was $1,400. I looked up. Taxes, he said, before I could speak. Ryan had a significant quarterly tax event. We discussed redirecting a portion of your allowance for 2 months. It's temporary. Ryan discussed this with me on Sunday, I said. He didn't mention any tax event. Something moved across Marcus's face. It was fast, and he controlled it quickly. and if I had not been watching carefully, I would have missed it. It was not embarrassment. It was not guilt. It was calculation. He probably didn't want to worry you with the details, Marcus said. He tells me everything, I said. Gerald. He said my name the way a teacher uses a student's name when the student is being difficult. I manage our finances. Ryan trusts me to handle this. If you want to call him and interrupt his day to talk about quarterly tax adjustments, you're welcome to do that. I did not call Ryan. But that night I opened my notebook and I wrote for 2 full pages, and I made a decision. I want to be careful about how I tell you what happened next, because I am aware of how it sounds. An old man, suspicious of his son's husband, snooping around. I know how that story can look. So I want you to understand that I did not go looking for evidence of something I wanted to find. I went looking because I needed to know the truth, whatever it was. I told myself that if I was wrong, if this was all my poor arithmetic and fading memory, then I would close the notebook, say nothing, and carry the shame of my suspicion quietly for the rest of my life. I called my bank and requested paper statements going back 3 years. They arrived in a large envelope that I opened at the kitchen table on a Saturday morning with my reading glasses and a yellow highlighter. Ryan's wire transfers had stopped 26 months ago. There was not a single one after that date. What appeared instead, every month, was a cash deposit, always on a Wednesday or Thursday, always between 2 and 4 business days after Marcus's Tuesday visit, always for an amount that matched what I had recorded in my notebook. Marcus was depositing the money himself. He was bringing me a portion of what Ryan sent, keeping the rest, and depositing whatever he gave me in cash to create a paper trail that would look, from the outside, like Ryan's support continuing normally. I counted the difference between what Ryan would have sent and what I had actually received. 26 months of shortfalls, ranging from $600 to $1,600 per month. The total, when I added it up 3 times to be sure, was $31,400. I sat at my table for a long time. The oak tree was budding outside the window. Eleanor had loved spring more than any other season. I thought about calling Ryan immediately. I planned the conversation in my head several times. Each version ended the same way, with my son devastated, his marriage in crisis, his life upended, and me as the person who had delivered the blow. I did not call, not yet. What I did instead was call a woman named Patricia Chen, who had been Eleanor's closest friend for 30 years and who had spent her career as a forensic accountant before her retirement. I drove to her house with my bank statements and my notebook and a lemon cake from the bakery on Elm Street, because I was raised to never arrive empty-handed. Patricia sat at her dining room table with my documents for 2 hours while I drank her coffee and looked at her garden. When she came back to the kitchen, she was not surprised. She had the careful, neutral expression of a professional who has seen this before. "This is elder financial abuse," she said. "That's what it's called. It has a name because it happens all the time, Gerald, more often than people want to believe." She explained what she saw in the documents. She used words like systematic and deliberate. She told me I had been more careful than most. The notebook was crucial, she said. Without the notebook, the cash deposits could be explained away. "What do I do?" I asked. "You document everything," she said. "Then you decide who you want in your corner when you tell your son." I spent the next 3 weeks being very careful. I said nothing to Marcus when he came in April. I counted the envelope, $1,700, wrote it in my notebook, thanked him for coming, offered him coffee. He declined the coffee, as he always did now, and was gone in 20 minutes. I contacted an attorney named Howard Briggs, who a neighbor had recommended after his own family dispute the previous year. Howard was in his 60s, slow-speaking, unhurried. He listened to my story without interrupting. When I was done, he asked for copies of everything. "Your son needs to know," Howard said at the end of our second meeting. "The longer this continues, the more complicated it becomes. But I want you to have someone with you when you tell him. Not me, someone he knows. Someone he trusts." I thought about this for several days. The person Ryan trusted most in the world, after Marcus, was a man named Daniel Okafor, his oldest friend, who had known Ryan since college and who served as a board member at Ryan's company. Daniel had been the best man at the wedding. He had danced with me at the reception and told me Eleanor would have loved the flowers. I called Daniel on a Tuesday morning. I told him I needed to speak with him about something serious before I spoke to Ryan, and that I was asking him as a favor and as a friend. He drove to my house the following Saturday. I will not describe Daniel's expression as he sat at my kitchen table and read through what I had assembled. I will only say that he was quiet for a very long time, and when he finally spoke, His voice was controlled in the way that means someone is working to keep it that way. "How long have you known?" he asked. "I've been certain for about 5 weeks," I said. "I suspected longer." "And you said nothing to Ryan?" "I needed to be sure first," I said. "And I needed to know what I was asking him to walk into." Daniel looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly, the way you nod when you understand something larger than the words that were just spoken. "I'll be there," he said. "When you tell him, I'll be there." We chose Ryan's birthday. I know how that sounds, the timing seems cruel, and perhaps it was. But Ryan had already planned to fly home for the weekend, and it meant I would have him in person rather than on a phone call. And Daniel was already coming to the birthday dinner, and somewhere in the back of my mind I thought, this is the day his life changes. Let it also be a day he already associates with people who love him. Ryan arrived Friday evening with a bottle of wine and his good coat, and that particular energy he carries when he is trying to be present, when he has made a decision to be here, in this house, with me, and not in the office in his head where he usually lives. We had dinner. We talked about his childhood. I showed him some photographs I had found while going through old boxes, pictures of him at 8 years old trying to fly a kite in this backyard, all concentration and determination. Marcus had sent his regrets. "A client emergency," he said. He would see us Sunday. On Saturday morning, Daniel arrived at 10 o'clock. Ryan was surprised but pleased. The three of us had a history of easy conversation, the kind that old friendships and good coffee produce. We sat in the living room, and I watched Ryan's face shift through several expressions as he looked between us, reading the room the way smart people do. "What's going on?" he said. "I need to show you some things," I said. "And I need you to let me get through all of it before you say anything. Can you do that for me?" Ryan set down his coffee mug. He straightened in his chair. He looked at me with his mother's eyes, that particular stillness she had when she was preparing herself for something hard. "Yes," he said. "I can do that." I had organized everything in a manila folder, the way Howard had suggested: bank statements first, then the notebook, then Patricia's summary, then a timeline Daniel had helped me put together. I walked my son through 2.5 years of his marriage, page by page, while he sat in his childhood living room and did not say a word. When I finished, he sat with his hands. A cardinal had landed in its branches, Eleanor's favorite bird, the reason she planted feeders every winter. "How much?" Ryan said finally. His voice was very quiet. $31,400 over 26 months, I said. "That's confirmed. There may be other accounts I don't have visibility into." Ryan closed his eyes. When he opened them, he looked at Daniel. "Did you know?" "No," Daniel said. "Your father called me 5 weeks ago. I've been helping him prepare." Ryan looked at me then, and there was something in his expression I was not prepared for. Not anger. I had expected anger, had rehearsed how to receive it. What I saw instead was grief. Clean, uncomplicated grief. The kind that has not yet become anything else. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" he asked. "Because you love him," I said. "And I needed to be certain. And I stopped. I needed you to be able to look at evidence instead of just taking my word for it. Because I'm your father, and you would have believed me. And I didn't want you to blow up your marriage on an old man's suspicion." Ryan stood up. He walked to the window and stood there with his back to us for several minutes. I watched the cardinal in the oak tree. It flew away. When Ryan turned around, he was not the boy in those photographs. All concentration and determination over a kite that would not fly. He was 38 years old, and something in his face had settled into a kind of resolution that I recognized because I had seen it in Eleanor in her hardest moments. A decision being made, quietly, completely. "I need to make some calls," he said. "I will not walk you through the legal process in detail, because it is not the point of this story, and because some of it is still ongoing. What I will tell you is this. Howard Briggs connected Ryan with an attorney in San Francisco who specialized in exactly this kind of case. An independent audit of the household, accounts the ones Marcus managed for. Ryan revealed that the $31,000 was not the complete picture. It was, as Patricia had suggested might be possible, only the portion I could see. Marcus did not deny what he had done when confronted with what Ryan's attorneys had assembled. There was not much room for denial. What he said, and Ryan told me this himself, was that he had intended to pay it back, that it had started small and grown beyond what he had anticipated, that he had been planning to stop. Ryan filed for divorce 8 days after my birthday weekend. I will not tell you that this had a clean and satisfying ending, because it did not entirely. My son's marriage was 2.5 years of his life. The man he had loved, or believed he loved, had been running a calculation beneath every conversation, every dinner, every phone call home. That is not a wound that closes in a season. What I will tell you is what Ryan said to me on the phone, 3 weeks after the confrontation, after the attorneys had begun their work, and the immediate chaos had settled into something more procedural. "I keep thinking about the water heater," he said. "What do you mean?" "When it broke, you called Marcus instead of me. Because you didn't want to bother me." He paused. He saw that and he used it. He used the fact that you love me and didn't want to be a burden. I did not say anything. "That's the part I can't stop thinking about," Ryan said. "Not the money. The part where he looked at how much you love me and figured out how to make it into a door." I was asked some months later to speak at a community forum on financial exploitation of older adults. A local nonprofit organized the event, and they had somehow heard about my situation through the network of attorneys and advocates who work in this space. I almost said no. I am a private person. Eleanor always said I was better at listening than talking. But I thought about Patricia Chen, sitting at her dining room table with my documents and her quiet professional patience, telling me this happens more than people want to believe. I thought about how long I had doubted my own arithmetic. I thought about the notebook in the pocket of my funeral suit and the particular loneliness of suspecting something terrible and having no one to tell. I said yes. I stood at a podium in a church meeting hall on a Wednesday evening in October, in front of perhaps 90 people, most of them around my age. I told them what I have told you. Not all of it. I left out some details that belong to Ryan and not to me, but the shape of it. The way it begins small and feels like confusion. The way the person doing it uses your love for someone else as the mechanism. The way you doubt yourself before you doubt them, and how long that doubt can protect the wrong person. When I finished, an older woman in the third row raised her hand. She had white hair and careful eyes, and she asked, "What made you start writing things down?" I thought about it honestly. "I think it was Eleanor," I said. "My wife. She used to say if something feels wrong 3 times, it is wrong once." I heard it in her voice, eventually. I did not add the other part, the part I thought about driving home that night. That Eleanor had also told me, the last coherent conversation we had before she died, that I was going to be all right, that I was more capable than I knew, that I should not let anyone, ever, make me doubt what I knew. I had forgotten that for a while. I was glad I remembered it before it was too late. If you are watching this, and something in your life feels wrong the 3rd time, please don't do what I did and call it your own confusion. Write it down. Find your Patricia Chen, your Howard Briggs, your Daniel. You do not have to be certain before you ask for help. You only have to be honest about what you know. And if you have someone you love who is older, someone who would not want to worry you over small things, call them. Not to check on them the way you check a box. Call them the way Ryan called me on my birthday, asking a real question, leaving room for a real answer. That phone call, that small moment of a son remembering to ask the specific question that was the beginning of the end of a lie I had been carrying alone for 2.5 years. It was the best birthday gift I have ever received. If this story meant something to you, please share it with someone you love. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, join our family. We tell stories here because we believe that speaking the truth out loud is the first step toward justice. We'll see you in the next one.